May 19th, 1991, early morning hours. David Cargill's just finished his sophomore year at a college in Florida. He's from the suburbs north of New York City, and that night he's getting hammered with his boys. I mean, you know how it is when you just come back from college for the summer. Not a care in the world. They go to some house parties, a bar or two, and then they decide to cruise into the city that night to show off their new stereo system. Or so they say at first. Turns out they were actually looking for hookers on the west side, but there were too many cops, and they decide to head home, just cruising down the West Side Highway, when all of a sudden, a beat-up red sedan catches up next to them, gaining speed. These kids are on top of the world, but their paths are about to cross with one of the most brutal drug-dealing crews of New York City's crack era. I mean, this is New York City in the early 90s, like a war zone. Over 2,000 murders a year, 5 times the number it has now. 6 bodies dropping a day. The crack wars are in full effect, as warring crews go to battle over million-dollar corners and desperate addicts try to get money any way they can. And nobody goes to war quite like the Wild Cowboys, a Washington Heights-based gang that ran a number of spots in the South Bronx. Led by Lenny and Nelson Sepulveda, they brought in upwards of $16 million a year and wouldn't hesitate to publicly execute anyone who crossed them. See, in the 1980s, it was the Jamaican posses bringing over outrageous levels of gunplay honed in the streets of Kingston during the 1970s political battles. The Spanglers, the Shower Posse, and all them. But in recent years, the Dominican crews from the Heights have started eclipsing them. The Dominicans took over from the Cubans in the early 80s as the wholesalers for the Colombian cartels shipping product into the US. But it took them a little bit longer to get into the retail side of the drug trade. Once they figured that out, they took over corners all over uptown Manhattan, the South Bronx, Brooklyn, and Washington Heights, the capital of Dominican New York, is home to all sorts of kingpins. That night, a number of these kingpins decide they're going to a party at one of the clubs downtown. It wasn't nothing for them to ride their souped-up Beamers to the Palladium or the Tunnel and drop thousands on champagne. And on this night, Lenny is taking some of his top spot managers to the infamous Manhattan club Limelight. One of his main enforcers, known as Platano, is there separately. So is a big-time gun dealer named Polanco. Polanco had sold a bunch of Uzis to Lenny. One was defective, so Lenny returned it to be fixed. They're all wasted outside the club, and Polanco returns the Uzi, right as the guys decide to leave Limelight and head to an after-hour spot in the Bronx. Right around 57th Street, though, one of their cars is cut off by Cargill and his friends. What happens next is the first domino in a chain of events that would lead to the dismantling of one of the most violent crews to ever operate in New York City, suspected of at least 30 and up to 60 murders and countless other acts of violence. This is the Underworld Podcast.